Hello everyone, AmyR here for Prairie Paper and Ink, and I'm still doing Valentine's cards, and this one is definitely more Valentine-y themed than a lot of the other ones, but could still work to send to a friend, I think anyway. Still on a watercolor kick, just experimenting with different mediums, and this time I thought I'd step out of the box, and instead of using my Distress ink pads, which I've used quite a bit and love to use, I really wanted intense colors, so this time I'm using the re-inkers, which I have a few. I don't have very many of them. I got them in just the colors I use the most often. So today I'm using Spun Sugar, Seedless Preserves, and Picked Raspberry, and I just put a drop of them into this little palette here. And I did 2 drops of the Spun Sugar because I knew I wanted more of this pink, and Spun Sugar is such a light color that you need more. Whereas the Seedless Preserves and the Picked Raspberry, or especially the Seedless Preserves, are very intense. And you can see here, I just wet down my Distress watercolor cardstock. I had the smooth side facing up. I taped it onto my Epicurean cutting board. And I had heavily wet the cardstock with clean water, like saturated quite a bit, and then mixed the re-inkers with a little bit of water, and then just dropped them onto the cardstock. And then after I did that, I actually spritzed this with even more water just to really get these colors to kind of move a bit more. And then I set it aside to dry, air dry. I didn't want to heat set it. So set that aside, and while that was drying, I've got this Simon Says stamp. This is the Love Bouquet die, which is extremely intricate and detailed, and I've been wanting to use this since I got it. So I pulled it out and some gold glitter cardstock. And to run it through my Big Shot, I've got the magnetic platform, and then I have a metal shim, then the cutting plate, the cardstock, the die, another cutting plate, and then I ran that twice, like back and forth through my machine. The metal shim just gives it a little extra pressure so that it will die cut. And then I have the I Love You die. Since I've got my die cut machine out, I want to do it all at once. And this piece of the same watercolor paper that I had experimented with a little bit before I started filming. And Gavin's behind me in his playpen, just if you hear a little bit of rambling chatter. So I ran that through, and I'll get to the I Love You die cut in a bit. But yeah, once I was done die cutting the Love Bouquet, I used a pin to press it out of the die because you can see it's so intricate, so pretty. So my watercolor piece had fully dried. So then I grabbed my Distress sprayer and spritzed some clear water over the watercolor piece and let it sit for about 30 seconds or so. And then I picked up that water with a paper towel, and you can see it creates this really fun splatter effect. So I quickly hit that with my heat tool to dry it, and it also intensifies the effect of the water. And then I did it a second time to get even a more intense kind of splatter effect, and spritzed it again, let it sit for about 30 to 45 seconds. Picked up the water with the paper towel and then hit that with my heat tool a second time to quickly dry it and intensify the Distress ink effect. So once I was done with that, while it was still warm, I quickly peeled off the painter's tape I'd used. When the tape is warm, it comes off cleaner and there's less chance of it tearing your cardstock. So got that all pulled off, and then I ran it through my die cut machine with the biggest die from the Blueprints 1 Dynamics from MFT. And then I have the Sending You Happy Thoughts stamp set from Simon Says, and just used my grid mat here to line up a couple of the sentiments, and then there's a couple little hearts in the set too that I decided to use. And I made sure this panel was completely dry, and then I coated it generously with anti-static powder. And then before I even stamped anything, I quickly poured the embossing powder over the image just to make sure, like over the panel, to make sure that the embossing powder wasn't going to cling to anything. And then I'm going to ink up the stamps with Versamark ink, which is clear sticky ink. And I just kind of placed the die cut over the panel just to kind of give me an idea where I wanted to stamp my sentiment. So I inked up the sending word with the Versamark ink and stamped that directly onto the panel, and then coated it with a Ranger's Ultra Fine Gold embossing powder, and then melted that with my heat tool. And then I coated the panel a second time with the anti-static powder just in case my fingers left any marks on there. I didn't want embossing powder to cling to that, especially this embossing powder because it's the ultra fine. So of course it picks out fine detail like that. So coated it with the anti-static powder a second time, and then I stamped the hearts with the same Versamark sticky ink and then coated them with the embossing powder. And then I had this scrap of a plum color of cardstock that I coated with the anti-static powder again, and then stamped the Lots of Love stamp onto the cardstock. And this is where this ultra fine detail embossing powder comes in handy, because this is a tiny, tiny little sentiment. And regular embossing powder, usually the granules are too big, and you wouldn't even be able to see like what it says, or you would just lose a detail. So once it was embossed, I wiped off the anti-static powder, and then I just used my scissors to trim it down and cut little flag ends rather than my paper cutter, because it was so detailed and just such a tiny little piece. And then for the die cut itself, I have never done this before. I finally got my hands on some spray adhesive. So I just have a box that I use for like spraying, and I don't care, like it's eventually especially going to get wrecked with the adhesive. So I flipped the die cut over so the back was facing up, and then just coated it with a few sprays of the spray adhesive, and it just makes it so much easier to adhere die cuts like this, rather than trying to apply, you know, my multimedia mat, which I'm using here to apply the sequins. Yeah, so now that I finally have it, I'll be using it not all the time, but more frequently, and it just makes using, like, I usually avoid really tiny, fine, detailed die cuts like this because of that. So this just gives me an option to start using the die cuts that I like using, but usually avoid because they're just kind of a pain in the butt. So that got it adhered in place, and then the sequins are just random ones from my stash. I found some gold sequins just from different sources in my stash, and I adhered those, and then the Lots of Love embossed little piece I adhered with some foam tape, and then I scored my pink cardstock base with my Teflon bone folder. Standard A2 size cards of 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And then I used a fair bit of foam tape to adhere this panel to the card front. Funny thing is it didn't warp like at all with all the watercoloring it did, because it taped down so well. But with all the heat embossing, it did warp it a little bit. So the foam tape helps keep it all flat. And then for the inside of the card, this is where I'm going to use this I Love You die cut. And I'm going to line that up on the inside of the card, and then adhere it with the multimedia mat again. And then once I've got that adhered, I wanted to kind of bring the continuity and just kind of finish it off a little more. So I stamped the hearts with my Delicata Golden Glitz ink, which after I did that, I was like, oh, I should have done that on the front rather than emboss the hearts. I should have stamped them with the Golden Glitz ink because it's so pretty. And then you'll see in the picture at the end, I didn't show this in the video because it was an afterthought. I had the one full heart die cut from cutting out the Love Bouquet, and I didn't want to put that to waste. So I actually just gently peeled up part of the die cut word and slipped that heart underneath it, just to finish off the inside and make use of that die cut rather than throwing it out. So if you're interested in any of the supplies used, there'll be all the links in the description box below the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.